before. I'm the director of the Omega Centre, and we have great pleasure today in having Jeff Kenworthy, who is Professor of Sustainable Cities at Curtin University, currently on some kind of sabbatical in Germany, who is passing through London, and I took the opportunity of asking if he would be prepared to give a talk in a similar series, and he very kindly agreed. And he's agreed to give a talk on the history and importance of the revitalisation of the urban rail system in Perth. And I suppose, in Western Australia, rather than Scotland, by the way, for those of you who don't know Perth and Australia, to revitalise a rail system in Australia is quite an achievement. And if you can do it in Australia, then I suppose the presumption is that it's doable in other places, given the kind of opposition that originally was there. Jeff I've known for many years, and is co-author of this book, Cities of Automobile Dependence, which I suppose one could say really sort of brought him onto the platform of transportation, city planning internationally, and for some reason which I never understood, wrote a book with Peter Newman that proved some controversy, and maybe he might like to talk about this, and that there seemed to be a path dependency intellectual school of thought that felt that the arguments that were proposed linking automobile with the vision of the American dream and densities somehow was a dream that should not be criticised in the way it was criticised. And things have moved on a great deal since, as is often the case. The radicals become the leaders, and I'm pleased to say that Jeff has very much taken up that role and has since moved into the field of public transport and railways, and the relationship these projects contribute to sustainability. And Jeff, thanks very much for coming. We'll look forward to your presentation.
Thanks very much, Harry. Well, look, I've done an unusual thing. I've decided to just talk off the cuff. Everybody has PowerPoints, and I do too, always. But I won't use a PowerPoint today. I'll just use a few visual aids that are very unstructured as we go along. But mainly, I just really want to tell you a story. Story time. And that is the history of rail in Perth, and how we got to where we are today, which is a very different and much more progressive situation from where we came from. For those of you who don't know Perth, Perth is a very, very sprawling city. It has a density of about 11 persons per hectare, and London is around 50 persons per hectare, so 5 times the density here. And it extends enormously. The metro area goes from about 50 kilometres north of the central business district to 75 kilometres south, so we've got an urban area of 125 kilometres north to south, and about 60 kilometres east. And it's got 1.5 million people, so we are talking some serious sprawl here. Now, that's the situation today. Perth, as I say, 1.5 million people. But when I got into this whole area of transport and land use development and so on, that was back in 1976, and Perth's population then was around about 760,000 or something like that. No, 720,000. So less than half the population that it is today. And it was a city that had in those days 3 railway lines, and they were diesel railway lines. So they were old diesel rolling stock that was purchased in the 1950s. And they were chugging along these three suburban lines. There was a 19-kilometre line to the south to Fremantle, to the port. There was a 19-kilometre line to the northeast to Midland, and there was a 28-kilometre line to the southeast to a place called Armadale. That was the Perth rail network. When I was a student at university in 1979 doing honours with Peter Newman as my supervisor, the Conservative government in Western Australia decided that they wanted to close the Fremantle railway line. So one 19-kilometre arm of the Perth rail system was going to be closed. And the argument that they put forward was that the Fremantle railway line was the least economic functioning railway line in Perth. It was the least economically viable, therefore, in their reasoning, deserved to be closed. The reality is, which became evident, and I'll jump a little bit forward now and then I'll backfill the story. The reality is that the Fremantle railway line, which they closed, was actually the best performing line economically, because you had Fremantle, a big sub-centre, the port of the Perth metropolitan region on one end and the Perth Central Business District on the other. So there was actually a lot of backloading happening on the rail line. It wasn't all just tidal flow in the peak period direction. There was a lot of off-peak use as well. So it was actually doing very, very well. What the political masters didn't tell us was, and perhaps they didn't even know the real intrigue and the real story of the program bureaucrats were running in Perth, and that was that they wanted the Fremantle Railway right-of-way for a freeway. So you've got, north of the Central Business District, you've got a freeway running called Mitchell Freeway. And then you've got Fremantle in the south. And running along the coast, you've got the Fremantle Railway line. They wanted the land that started about halfway along that line to build a freeway to connect all the way to the south of the city. And they didn't tell us this. They lied. They said it's not economically viable. So after we processed the fact that the government intended to close the Fremantle line, Peter and I and a few other people formed an urban action group called the Friends of the Railways, because, to put it in an academic context, this announcement was made in February 1979, and this is during the the Iranian oil, the second oil crisis. The first oil crisis was 73, 74, and the second one was in 79. So in the Iranian Revolution, and this was, we considered not to be a very good time to go closing public transport systems, because we were already aware of this concept of peak oil. We knew about Hubbart's bubble and all of that sort of thing, and so we thought, this is not a good idea. Perth is a very car-dependent city. It needs its public transport system. What the government should be doing is upgrading it, not tearing it out. So we formed an urban action group called Friends of the Railways, and we mounted a campaign which lasted for the whole of my honours year, from February through to September. We did a lot of research. We dug out a lot of dirt. We had there were people within the system who fed us information, who didn't agree with the government's decision, and we went public with it. And we mounted a very, very effective media campaign to try to bring attention to the fact that this was not a good decision. We got front page of the Daily News, which was the then evening newspaper, which doesn't operate anymore. We got in the West Australian, the daily newspaper, and TV and radio and so on, and caused a lot of embarrassment for the government at the time. Because one of the things that was leaked were the documents that proved that the Fremantle Railway line was the best performing line economically. And the government had dug a grave for itself because it had stated unequivocally this was a policy decision on economic grounds. We actually published the documents. It was actually published, photographed and published in the newspaper to show that this was just a lie. And this caused a lot of political heat. And so we ran this campaign, Peter and I and about 4 or 5 other people. One of the guys in our group ran for Parliament and stood against the Minister for Transport, and yeah, all these kinds of these things. It was a pretty heavy political campaign. During the course of that campaign, we got 110,000 signatures from the Perth population at the time when the Perth population was about 750,000 people. Right? We got 110,000 signatures saying, "Do not close the railway line." Well, they did close the railway line. They closed it in September 1979. So we lost that political fight. But we didn't lose it in the sense that the Labor Party, the slightly left-leaning, in fact really quite middle-of-the-road party, took up the policy that if re-elected, they would bring back the Fremantle Railway line. And although there was an election at the end of 1979 or early in 1980, the government was returned. So the Fremantle Railway line remained closed. But then there was another state election in February 1983, and the Labor Party was returned, was elected to government. And the first thing they did was to honour the promise to reopen the Fremantle Railway line. So in May 1983, that line was reopened as a diesel service. The question then became, okay, who's going to be using in the future, we want to grow public transport, who's going to be using a moribund diesel rail service that is too slow, and the rolling stock is unattractive, uncomfortable, it's not air conditioned, etc. Some of the wagons were air conditioned, but a lot weren't. So the government then, having reopened the line, was faced with, well, what do we actually do with the Perth rail system? So over a period of 5 years, between 1983 and 1988, there was a lot of work done within government to work out, do we buy new diesel rolling stock and run nice new diesel trains? Do we tear the whole thing up and build busways? Do we electrify the system? So there were a lot of analyses done there about what do we do with the system. And in the end, there was a very, very detailed economic benefit cost analysis done by hard-nosed, bean-counting economist type of people. And it came out that electrification of the lines was the most economically sensible, cost-effective thing to do. But that was not an easy decision because there was a lot of politics involved in it, because there were elements within the Labor Party that did not want to electrify. They didn't want to make that big a commitment to public transport. They were worried. They were worried about the economics of the whole thing. And in the end, and this, my memory is a little bit blurry on this, but there was one particular critical weekend where Cabinet was going to make a decision. Do we go with this electrified system or don't we? And I know from what Peter told me that there was an entire weekend of lobbying on the telephone. Members of Parliament, members of the Cabinet, there was a lot of phone calls made. And as it turned out, one of the critical things that flipped it over and they did go with the electrification decision, was a deal that was cut with the electrical supplier and the cost of the energy, the unit cost of the energy. And that was not critical to the overall benefit cost analysis, but it was a kind of a, if you like, something that was an important win for those who were worried about the economics of it. It made it sweeter, and so that decision was taken to electrify the whole Perth suburban rail system. So the 19-kilometre line to Fremantle, the 19-kilometre line to Midland, the 28-kilometre line to Armidale. Brand new system, new trains, new electrical propulsion. That decision was taken in 1988, and the electrified system was opened in 1991 on budget and on time. And it was a project that cost around about $160 million in 1988, 91 dollars. So that was a critical turning point in the story of Perth, because we then had a very competitive, very attractive new train system. And the interesting thing that happened was, prior to that, patronage of rail, overall patronage of rail in Perth was very flat. As soon as the electrification occurred, the curve turned rapidly upwards, rapidly. People used the new system because it was very competitive in speed terms, better acceleration, better deceleration, higher speeds, and more comfort, air conditioned, and so on. So rail patronage started to grow. It was a big success. The politicians who were still in government at that time, still Labor Party politicians, one in particular, the Minister for Transport, kind of thought, okay, well, if this is so successful, what about the northern suburbs? What about the new mortgage belt, the suburbs that extend up the coast, up past the beaches? This is the mortgage belt. This is the first home buyers territory. This is the swinging seats, right? These are the seats that change hands. These are the seats that determine elections, right? So he had this vision, as in a dream, of a railway line to the north, right? About 30 kilometres. And he then said, we need a study that analyses this. So a consulting firm, who shall remain nameless, was employed to come up with a plan. And they came up with a plan which was a busway system. And there were a lot of people, including us, who weren't happy about that. And to cut a very long story short, we got a decision to review that study, and we brought over Professor Lucan Vucic from University of Pennsylvania. We brought over a gentleman called Mr. Howard, who ran the Newcastle upon Tyne public transport system. He was the head of that. And Peter Newman. They were a three-person review panel. And they discovered a lot of holes in this consulting study. The critical hole in it was to cater for the capacity that's needed in that corridor. You need a certain number of buses operating on a certain frequency. And it's okay when they're operating on the freeway that runs through the northern suburbs. But when they hit the central business district, where do they go? It was like bus congestion nightmare. There was no room to cope with all these buses pouring off the busway system. So, to cut a long story short there, that study was overturned. The recommendation was made for a rail system. The political masters accepted that decision. They made a cabinet decision: we shall build the Northern Suburbs Railway line. That decision was taken in the early 1990s, in close to the opening of the electrified system, and that line, that 31 kilometre brand new line, was opened in 1993. So it was a very, very quick decision, and it was a very quick, effective project to build that railway line. It was built on time and on budget for, it was a total cost of around $260 million, something of that order. So now Perth had these 3 existing lines and a line to the north, and it was an instant success. That line captured 25% of its morning peak patronage from the commuters, the car commuters. This railway was operating at maximum speeds of 110 kilometres per hour. The freeway in the morning was a parking lot. The trains operated down the middle of the freeway. The whole distance was down the freeway median, and the driver saw the train whizzing by at 110. What am I doing in my car? 25% transferred over to the new train. Because it's a low density corridor, each station was fed by bus feeder routes, and those buses, the stations were especially designed to take the buses on overpass bus-only roads and drop the passengers right at the station. They go down the escalator to the platform and make an easy interchange with the rail. So that worked really, really well. So we had this new railway line, and it very, very quickly, the rail patronage in Perth quadrupled in the space of about 5 or 6 years. It went from 8 million people to 32 million people in a few years. Very big success, which is quite interesting because it's a low density environment that we're talking about. There's a lot of park and ride, there's a lot of kiss and ride, and there's a lot of bus rail transfer, but not in that corridor, not very much walk up patronage because the suburbs are so spread. So then everything kind of settled down into a happy situation. You know, we had this new rail system, nice new rail line to the north, and nobody really thought much about the southern corridor. The Labor government was thrown out in, when was it, 1996, I think it was. Oh, I can't remember the years. Anyway, the Conservative government came into power, looked at what a success the Northern Suburbs line had been, looked at what a success the electrification had been, and thought, there's political capital in this. What can we do to put our mark on public transport? So they came up with the idea of the Southern Suburbs Railway, which is all the way to Mandurah. Mandurah is a retirement community in Perth, a low density, just used to be beach houses and holiday places. It's now the second fastest growing municipality in Australia. So they thought, what we need is a high quality rail line to service that southern corridor, but we're talking 75 kilometres, talking a very long intra-urban railway line. Now, they came up with their vision, which was a kind of a bit of a cheapskate vision. They were trying to kind of minimise the costs, and their idea was, if I could, is there anywhere I can draw? No, there's nowhere I can draw. Okay, let me just put up a map here. Okay, look, these are the three existing lines that I was talking about. This is Fremantle, this is Armadale, this is Midland, this is the northern suburbs line that we constructed and incidentally have extended. It went to Currambine when it was first opened in '93. It now goes to a place called Clarkson. This is the 75-kilometre Perth to Mandurah railway line, which was opened December 23rd, 2007. Okay, that's the route that it followed. Now, the Liberal government, the Conservative government that came to power, their idea was, look, this part here between the central business district and down to here is too hard, it's too problematic. What we'll do is we'll take the trains out along the Armadale line and we'll extend this little spur line here across this direction to here. So we'll go in a triangle and then we'll proceed south, like that. Now, this was really a silly idea, and how silly it was didn't come to light until a long while after, but the bottom line is the frequency of trains that would have been proceeding up this line, turning off here on this spur line, and then having to mix it with the Armadale trains here, would have meant, according to the timetablers, would not have been able to be timetabled because it was a logjam. It was a big rail traffic jam. This was not a workable solution. It was a political thing, and there's seats involved here as well. So what happened was we kind of and others mounted this campaign to bring the railway line directly down here, which meant getting the rail in a tunnel under the city to connect to the central railway station. This was a critical factor. We had to get it over a bridge across the river here, a bridge called the Narrows Bridge, and it had to run along the median strip of a freeway which ran along the foreshore. Now, a freeway on a foreshore is already God's own junkyard, you know. It's not really aesthetically a problem to bring a rail line along an existing freeway. But there were political issues involved. There were a lot of people who didn't like that idea on aesthetic grounds and so on. But to cut a long story short, the Liberal government was thrown out, the Labor government was re-elected, and a big news study was mounted to analyse this route here or a direct route. And on purely, you know, on operational grounds alone, this direct route was the one that won out in the end. But there were a tremendous number of fights to be, technical details to be thrashed out. One of them was the route that the train should take to get to the central station. A lot of people did not want to have a tunnel. They wanted to take another circuitous route. And that meant that the trains would have to come into the central station, the driver would have to park the train, decommission that end of the train, walk to the other end of the train to get it out again, which the rail operator just said, this is not going to work, this is not workable. We need to run trains from Mandurah right through to Clarkson. We need a 125-kilometre line, railway line in the city. And that's what we got in the end. We won that fight, and we have a tunnel, the first big rail tunnel in Perth, and this works rather beautifully. What I'd like to do is to show you some pictures and also just a short video. There's an amplification of the problem here. This is the bridge where the train had to go over, and it has to go along the middle of the freeway here, and then at this point it goes into a tunnel, and it continues in a tunnel. There's a big station here, it continues in a tunnel here, and this is the central city station, which is connected underground by pedestrian paths to the existing main station. So basically they did a dog leg on the existing central station and connected the train in here. It then proceeds out here and it goes to the north. Okay, so what I'll do now is just to show you, and I won't hold these slides on the screen for any length of time at all, but just to give you a visual sense of the low density environment in which this, I should say, this, as I said, this Mandurah line was opened December 23rd, 2007. They predicted that it would hit 50,000 passengers per day sometime in the distant future, you know, for 10 years down the track. We're now 50,000 passengers per day. It was reached within 12 months. It was, I said publicly, repeatedly, your estimate of 50,000 passengers per day in so many years will be reached quickly, much more quickly than you think. And it was. It was, because the Mandurah railway line opened during that period when oil hit $145 a barrel. You know? And we created a lot of public transport habits in that period. People have retained that. They've kept on with that usage of that system. So just to show you the environment, I'll just quickly go through. This is not PowerPoint. This is the freeway to the south, and where the railway line for a considerable distance. I'll just go back to this here. Right down to around about here, it runs in the middle of a railway, middle of a freeway, and then it goes off onto its own route. So I'll just quickly show you this. Okay, so this is heading south from the central business district. Just a series of images that I took from the windscreen of a car. This is early stages of construction. You can see the loading here of the soil, creating the surface to lay the tracks. All the construction work happening there in the middle of the freeway. Here's one of the stations in a medium state of construction. Again, you can see the way the walkways have been provided from both sides. Just from different angles. This was a little tour that we did with some people to review the whole project. But you can see the kind of country that it's going through. I mean, this is just a dilapidated, kind of hobby farm house in one of the suburbs on the way down. There's the construction, the walkways going over to the station. I don't think that house is there anymore. This is another station. Yeah. So this is fairly early days. This would be around 2005. This would be early 2005, so 2.5 years before it opened. But you can see the poles going up for the electrical construction, blending in well with the high tension lines running along. But people get very offended very, very offended by the fact that you're going to hang bloody one single wire for the pantograph, and you've got you've got this on the side. I mean, I just have to laugh. I mean, I just don't think they can possibly be serious. You know, it's just a joke. It must be. So, and these are just some images to show the kind of suburbs that are on both sides of the railway line. So you can see the problem for a railway line feeding that system. But as I say, it's 50,000 per day already. Shortly after, you know. But this is really, really low density stuff. This is one of the stations that is not in the freeway. This is you can see here now the railway line is running through well, through bushland and with a bit of suburban development on one side. But the thing is that these areas around these stations, in this station in particular here, there is a different vision for the area, and we'll come to a picture in a moment. This was part of the tour. Yeah, so the idea is to try to build now, because you've got a lot of vacant land, you can do something with land use. So the idea is to build denser, more walkable communities which relate to the railway line, with a lot of walking and cycling within those communities. So these are the kind of things that are going up, the kind of construction that is going up near to the station. Now, these subdivisions, these new kinds of subdivisions which use what we call livable neighbourhood design principles, are very, very popular in the marketplace. People camped in tents for 4 nights to get these blocks of land when they were released. And they're small blocks of land, but they come with some amenity, they come with some mixed land use and some quality design. Plus, they have the rail line to get to the city. So that's the kind of environment. This is the end station before the train arrived, right? So this is currently, when this picture was taken, it was being operated on buses, okay? But the train actually came in to here, and you'll see pictures that I'll show you in a moment. So it's a park and ride lot. That's all it is. It's a park and ride lot. But the local council there really wants to develop transit-oriented development around this station. The key thing is to get rid of the park and ride to the next station north of this station, but that station was not part of the original construction plan, so there's nowhere to move that parking to. But that's it. That's where the train, this is prior to the arrival of the train line, but that is where the train line comes in to the final station, Mandurah, 75 kilometres south of the city. And you'll see how that's changed in the next quick set of slides that I'll show you. You said you haven't seen Peter. That's Peter there, on the right. Yeah, so there we are. It's a big park and ride lot. More of the construction, bring up the wires, Jersey barriers, sections for bridges. Now this project, the construction of the Perth to Mandurah railway line was $1.6 billion. That's complete. That's rolling stock, track, electrification, maintenance facility, the works. But when you look at that environment, it is not the kind of environment that you think, well, rail is going to work. That does. It's well planned and well fed from the surrounding areas. There is one of the stations in operation after opening. So people come down from higher level, the road level, down to the rail station platforms. There's a train coming in, and that's what the stations look like. Inside the trains, quite nice, very clean, air conditioned, quite spacious, and quite nice views from the window as well. Part of the view that you get is the central business. When you get close to the city, this is the central business district in the background. This is the river, which is not a river, it's a saltwater estuary. And the train runs along here. That picture's taken from the train, and runs along the freeway all the way into the city. And that is the Perth Central station there. Here's one of the stations built in the middle of the freeway. You can see the problem that you have in Perth of feeding a system like that when you've got it down the middle of the freeway. Big park and ride lots. Let's see that. And just very quickly, I want to show you the opening. I was invited to the opening, as was Peter. People who kind of helped the government ride the project through, despite the terrible attention that the West Australian gave to it. The West Australian decided that it was not a project that the editor liked, and that the editor took every opportunity possible to discredit the project, and there was a constant media war going on over the 4 years of the construction of the project. And it took...
Value for money grounds. Value for money grounds.
I'm sorry?
Value for money.
Yeah, that was one of the things. They picked up on any delays in construction, any problems with the tunnelling was striking as it went under the city, union problems, company not honouring contracts, every possible opportunity to badmouth the project was always front page, you know. And so there was a constant need to put the truth in there, to put some perspective on it. You know, it was a shameful piece of extended reporting on a project. Very, very unfair. The editor, just did not like the project, and he decided that his mission would be to kind of bring it down. Anyway, this is the opening day. This was the very first trains, that left. The first trains that left Perth Central Station to go to Mandurah. Big event. Packed out the station, waiting to get on to leave to go to Mandurah. There's the train. These are new trains that were built. The trains had to be custom built for the Mandurah line, because the Mandurah line has to operate at a maximum speed of 130 kilometres per hour. The maximum allowable speed on the freeway is 100 kilometres per hour. So even when cars are moving at the maximum speed, and presumably obeying the rule of the law, the train is going past them. It's 48 minutes it takes to get from Perth to Mandurah, and that is a distance of 75 kilometres. So it's an average speed of 90-something kilometres per hour. Inside the new trains, the trains were built by Bombardier.
train is different from the one you showed earlier.
Yes,
It's a much
it is,
higher
yeah.
seating density.
Exactly, yeah. These new trains were deliberately built with surveys were done about what passengers want, what they like. They by and large don't like the sitting opposite one another like the London Tube, and so the new trains were built according to this configuration that people preferred, even though in terms of total loading, total capacity, it's reduced because there's less standing around. So that's that, and we'll get down to Mandurah Station. So we're now at Mandurah, people getting off the train, and in a moment you'll see that in all the things now in Perth and around Australia that we do, we always honour the local Indigenous people. They are involved in all of the opening ceremonies and just making that link to country, as it's called. So they were there to be part of the welcoming committee. Oh, and here we have some dancers, some people welcoming on stilts, dressed as Australian frilled lizards. You'll see these girls a bit more, a few of the slides. It was quite an event. Very satisfying for someone who's been involved in the fight since 1979, when they were closing railway lines, to be there at the opening in 2007 of a new line to Mandurah is beyond anything that I could have ever imagined. You know, this is 28 years of hard fighting to get to where we are today. And there's a lot of politics involved in it, a lot of use of media and a lot of sustained analysis and argument in favour of public transport and rail in particular. There's all the people that turned out for the opening. Very hot day, December the 23rd, a couple of days before Christmas. I think the temperature was about 38 degrees Celsius. And I just wanted to say a few words about the Minister for Transport, which we'll see in a moment. This is the Minister for Transport here. This is Alana McTiernan. She is the best Transport Minister that West Australia's ever had. She's the only one who's ever really had guts. Much, much better than all the men we've ever had as Ministers for Transport. She's the only Minister for Transport who's been a female, and she carried this project. When she woke up in the morning, for 4 years she was crucified. She was on the cross every day. You know, she was... You wouldn't believe what this woman had to endure, and she endured it, and she did it really well. And when she opened this railway line down to Mandurah on that day, this is another guy that was very important in the process. This is Stuart Hicks. He was the chair of the special panel that had to decide how to get the trains into the central area. He's the one who got the government to decide on the tunnel, which was the best decision that the city had made. So he was there, and honestly, this is the former Premier here, who retired, Jeff Gallop, and when she went up to make the speech, it was like rock star status. You know, it was just incredible to see the passion that people had and the respect that people had who knew what she'd been through, to finally get up there and to be opening that line. That's the Premier opening the line officially. politics. It works. Politics and good sound analysis that is backed up with the truth about what makes transport work. That's about it. Oh, that's where the central station empties into. It empties into this pedestrian wall in the heart of Perth. The entrance to the station is just on that side, on the left. So, the last thing I just wanted to do is to just show you this very short animation, which I think is useful to get a more dynamic sense of what the project is involved. Are these speakers on? Or?
Yes, they are.
Yeah, okay.
The Perth to Mandurah Railway is the centrepiece of the state government's new Metro Rail project, which also includes extensions and upgrades to the Northern Suburbs Railway, a spur off the Armidale line to Thornley, improvements to rail infrastructure through Victoria Park, and the purchase of 93 new state-of-the-art rail cars. The Perth to Mandurah Railway is a visionary project that will deliver fast, direct and efficient train service to Perth's fast-growing southern suburbs. The railway will be linked to an expanded bus network. New state-of-the-art rail cars are being built to service the existing network and the new line. 9 stations will be built along the 72-kilometre route to Mandurah and a further 2 in the city. All will be bus-train interchanges and feature high levels of security, including closed-circuit television, smart rider facilities, including fare gates, access for people with disabilities, including tactile paving and audio loops for the hearing impaired, bicycle access, kiosk, toilets, lifts and escalators. All stations, except Canning Bridge and the city stations, will have car parking, and all stations except Canning Bridge will be staffed. Journey times and weekday patronage have been estimated for each station. Construction will start in 2004, with services to Rockingham and Waikiki beginning in December 2006 and to Mandurah in December 2007. Mandurah Station will be on the corner of Fremantle Road and Allnut Street, next to the new bus station. The railway then follows the alignment of the future Perth-Bunbury Highway through Meadow Springs, Carlup, Lakelands and Baldivis, before veering west and following the eastern side of Mandurah Road, which becomes Ennis Avenue. The first stop after Mandurah is Waikiki, which will be in the southeast quadrant of Ennis Avenue and Safety Bay Road. From Waikiki, the railway runs parallel with the eastern side of Ennis Avenue to Rockingham Station, on the corner of Ennis Avenue and Ray Road. The station is being designed to link with expanded local transport services. Heading away from Rockingham, the line follows the Garden Island Highway Reserve east through Hillman. A new bridge will be built to take the railway over Mandurah Road and the freight railway line, and the route then heads northeast to the station in the new suburb of Wellard. The railway then goes under Wellard Road into Parmelia and under Challenger Avenue into Bertram before arriving at Thomas Road Station, to be built on the south side of Thomas Road. It then goes under Thomas Road, emerging briefly back on the surface, and then uses the existing Armidale Tunnel to get into the median of the Kwinana Freeway, where the line continues all the way to Perth. The next stop is at Thompson's Lake, which will be just north of the Belia Drive Kwinana Freeway interchange. This station has been designed to fully integrate with the Curtin Town Centre and will become the main public transport focus of the area. From north of Thompson's Lake all the way to the Narrows Bridge, there are significant works to be carried out to the freeway lanes by main roads. Heading further north, all will be made to the current bus station at South Street to accommodate a new train station. Leach Highway Station will be linked with bigger buses running along Leach Highway. Next, the railway crosses Mount Henry Bridge, which will be strengthened to allow trains to travel down the middle with extra lanes added on each side. Canning Bridge bus station will be converted to a train station, the last before Perth. From here, the railway will be built to the existing busway lanes. A new railway bridge will be built between the existing narrowest bridges to carry the train into the city. Across the bridge, the railway heads into a tunnel, stops at new underground stations at the Esplanade and William Street, before joining with the Northern Suburbs Railway. New Metro Rail, doubling Perth's passenger rail network by 2007.
So, I've probably done enough talking. Is there any questions, any discussion? Yeah.
I find it's a really, really fascinating story, actually. I find it quite extraordinary. Just looking at the pictures of the sort of density in the sort of landscape that the rail system goes through. Just wondered, firstly, two questions really. Firstly, what there is in the way of sort of subsidy to running costs and operating costs around network, and secondly, what the impacts have been on land use and development. I mean, you sort of touched on the new line, but I wondered sort of about the existing lines after they are electrified.
Yeah. It's been quite good. On this line, obviously, there's an effort to really integrate development around the station because there's a lot of available vacant land. Right? The existing lines, the Fremantle, the Midland, and the Armadale lines, there are some quite good transit-oriented developments that are occurring there through a planning mechanism in Western Australia which allows the declaration of redevelopment authorities. So what has happened is at the third station out of the central city on the Fremantle line is called Subiaco, S-U-B-I-A-C-O. And at Subiaco there is this really wonderful transit-oriented development, an urban village that has been built on the northern side of the railway line on old light industrial land that is no longer needed. It had reached its use-by date, so it was prime redevelopment land. On the south side of the railway line, there is a very attractive traditional inner suburb called Subiaco with a main street, farmers market and everything. And so what has happened is on the northern side is this big transit-oriented urban village has been built which respects and honours the pre-existing development but connects with it. And the key thing there was sinking the railway line for a distance of about 300 to 400 metres so that you could develop on the land over the railway line, so there was no barrier between the old suburb and the new suburb. So that was done, and the patronage, the weekly, no, was it the daily or the weekly? No, the weekly patronage through that particular station rose from around about 9,000 to about 17,000 with the gradual build-out of that new transit-oriented development. Perth's first transit-oriented supermarket, a big Woolworths supermarket, is right sort of at the top of the escalators. So you come up the escalators from the train station below, and you just walk straight into a supermarket that does not have any car parking around it. There's some car parking rear access at the back, but it's sleeved in and it's not really visible. It doesn't interfere with the pedestrian orientation, and that is a very, very beautiful urban village. I could actually, if you want, I can very quickly just open that up and just flick, just so you get a better idea of what I'm talking about. I've got no idea what order these are in or anything. We'll open them and just show you a few so that you know. So there's the railway line. Below the level, you've got. Oh, by the way, the redevelopment authorities say that they could have multiplied these densities by 5 times and they would have sold them. Everything here was sold on the blueprints. You could buy a dwelling for $500 deposit prior to construction, and some people were putting their $500 down and buying a bedsit unit here above the station for 180,000 Australian dollars, and in 7 months selling it for 350,000 bucks with only parting with the $500 deposit. They never even took keys. They never even owned it. And I wish that I'd done it. I'm the one who preaches this stuff. So, yeah, there's the bus interchange there. These are not working because they're scanned. But I've got other pictures that will come up. I don't know why they're. Yeah, here we go. The ones taken with the ordinary camera are that way because they've been scanned, and these ones are digital camera. So there's just some of an idea of some of the space. There's the station again. That's the old community there with the old street, with the main street. And this is all part of the new denser development that is filled in around the station. A lot of attention, because all of the urban design standards and all of the densities and every detail of the planning is controlled by the redevelopment authority. The redevelopment authority suspends local town planning scheme. In practice, it works with the local council, but it has the power to do what it wants. So it's very pedestrian orientated, very attractive public spaces. Mixture of densities, some high plot ratio single family homes ranging right up to 3-4 story apartment buildings, and it's trying to respect the 19th century development on the other side of the line in terms of its urban form.
Is any of this enhanced property value capture to help defray the costs of running the railway?
We haven't really got into value capture, which is a shame, because there clearly is a case for it. The redevelopment authority, under the Act of Parliament that controls the redevelopment authority, it must break even. It cannot make a loss. It is allowed to make a profit, and in practice, the Subiaco Redevelopment Authority has made money. This is a cycleway that runs from the Perth Central Business District all the way to City Beach, which is a lovely coastal beach.
Jeff, I didn't actually hear your answer to the gentleman's question, I think, about subsidy. Was there?
Oh, the subsidy, yeah.
Any subsidies involved? What's the...
I don't have the numbers specifically for the rail system to hand, but public transport in Perth per se, I think the last time I checked the numbers, the operating cost recovery ratio is only about 30%. So it's quite low. There are, Zurich recovers 52 or 53%. the systems in Tokyo make an operating profit. They make an operating profit in Hong Kong as well, I think. It's only part of the story though, because I really believe that the major economic benefits from a public transport system accrue to the non-users. Because when the system goes on strike, that's when you see the economic benefits to the non-users, because the roads become a parking lot, everything becomes non-operational. But unfortunately, those benefits don't appear in the balance sheet on the credit side of the public transport operator, only their direct costs and fare box revenue. So, yeah, just station. There's the Woolworths supermarket.
You made reference to hard-nosed economists. When they looked at this 30% return, what did they have to say, or who was paying the subsidies, who was actually paying this? The state was paying for it, and then ultimately it came from taxes, or did it come from federal grants?
No, state taxes.
So essentially, this is a European model of public.
Yeah, it's a very sensitive issue. The issue of fare rises for public transport is something that is a delicate political issue in Perth. There's one school of thought that says, geez, we really do have to try, improve the recovery ratio, but at the same time, it's not popular politically when you raise public transport fares in the same way that it's not politically popular if you suggest that there should be some form of road pricing. So it's in the same kind of category. So we just accept that public transport at the moment is subsidised, if you want to use that word. But the intention is to build a much more viable system that is structured around a rail backbone and that is not so heavily subsidised, that actually performs better. And I think we're getting there a little bit.
Did you have a framework or policy framework which had prioritised multi-criteria that had issues such as climate change or noise benefits, or was there an attempt, not necessarily to monetize, but to rationalise the subsidy, or was it just done politically as a project that was deemed to be best and the government will pay the difference?
It's a mixture of both. The Southern Suburbs Railway, this one that I just showed you, there was an independent, big, detailed benefit cost analysis done of the project by an independent team of people. And there's a very good report. I've got it on my computer if you want it. I can give it to you on a memory stick. I think I can find it. It is coming out with a very strong benefit cost ratio. I think depending on the what do you call it, the length of time over which the project is amortised. It's, I think, either 3.6 to 1 or 6 to 1, something of that order. And yeah, it's this benefit cost study, one of its principal foundations was that it would always err on being conservative. It would not push it. It did not want to be accused of pushing it in a favourable direction. So every decision that was taken on the conservative side. Conservative patronage estimates, conservative, social discount rates. All these things were done, and it still came out very, very good. But I don't think the kind of more altruistic things like climate change and so on figured very strongly. It was very much more local, parochial kind of decision making. What would be good for the future of the city? How does the new public transport system affect the way we plan the city? Can we come up with a different urban land use plan if we develop a better public transport system in a particular way? Those kind of issues were very, very strong. As were arguments about needing to future-proof the city in terms of oil, fossil fuels and so forth. There was quite a lot of, during the period of construction of the railway line, the state government hosted a number of events to do with peak oil. They actually brought over peak oil speakers. We had Bakhtiari from the Iranian oil company. We had a French French petroleum geologist, and we sponsored a number of conferences about peak oil. So the peak oil and climate change issues were there in the background, and they were linked to this. But there was no, I don't think there was really a formal, multi-criteria, assessment.
It's very fortunate, isn't it? The nature of the physical environment, urban environment for which you were promoting the line, although highly dispersed and therefore problematic in terms of the concentration demand that you require to justify the potential patronage on the line, is nevertheless physically accommodate development of this kind more readily than would be the case in an area where the existing development is much denser. I mean, look at the scale of those stations, the scale of the parking lots and so on, and trying to transplant that to the outer London is the difficulties that you would encounter.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in this, and it's a hugely impressive story. Congratulations on its success. But I'm interested in this use of the median strip in what we would call motorways as a railway line. Presumably it means that horizontal and vertical curves of the existing highway were such that they would accommodate them, make it physically feasible to build a railway. But also, was that a vacant gap that happened to be there that lent itself to that purpose? Or did you have to move the carriageways and widen the whole route in order to accommodate a railway down the centre, which you can only do if you haven't got development adjacent to the existing road of a nature which makes that prohibitively costly? Yeah,
well, there are a couple of issues here. In Perth, we have a very, very generous system of road reserves. So we have, where the freeways are, we have very, very wide reserves. We have 80-metre road reserves, 80 metres.
For possible future expansion?
A lot of land. Yeah, expansion of that, of the lanes. But the northern line, where the northern line was built, that would not have been so readily accommodated had it not been for a decision, a unilateral decision by the Premier of Western Australia in 1974, a guy called John Tonkin, who actually had enough visionary ability to say, look, you're building the Mitchell Freeway, but what about public transport? Well, main roads engineers didn't care about public transport. They figured it out. But he actually made them produce a median that would accommodate a future rapid transit corridor. The thing where the railway line went through areas where lanes had to be taken, built lanes had to be taken, they were all replaced on the edges, and there was land to do that. I argued that they shouldn't do that. I argued that you're actually adding dramatically to the passenger carrying capacity of that facility. Not to the hunks of metal carrying capacity, but to the people carrying capacity, which is ultimately the important thing. But they insisted that they replace every bit of lane that was lost. the southern line or along the northern line, it maintained parity. So the rail line was an addition.
Do you think you left the planets behind when you were at the northern link up? Do you think you left the planets behind? Because the northern link doesn't have any transport-oriented development proposals around it at all. You've got Mindarie Keys and places like that towards that direction.
Yeah.
It's not as like Subiaco, is it?
No.
None of that kind of thinking going on in that direction. Is that due to account each particular shire has its own prerogative in that area?
The 31 kilometre line up to Currumbine, most of the development, the suburban development, had already occurred. That northern corridor was being built from 1970, 1969, 70, 71, right through as the development front moved on. It was largely built out, so there's a limited amount that you could do. However, the Joondalup regional centre is a denser configuration, which does relate quite well now to the Joondalup railway station. So you've got the big shopping centre, you've got this boulevard, pedestrian boulevard that links, you've got open air dining, comes out of the shopping centre, and then people can walk into the Joondalup centre. You've now got some slight bit of higher density development around Currumbine, but north of Currumbine to Clarkson is where you go into territory that was not built out, and so there's much more effort now to try to get this kind of clustered development. But yeah,
down south towards Mandrews or like towards Port Kennedy, there's quite a lot of room for development. I get the impression that there's groupings of transport-oriented development down there.
Not yet, but the good thing is that the City of Mandurah, I've done a lot of work with the City of Mandurah and the Pure Development Commission, and both those bodies are highly supportive of densification around the stations within their local shires. The problem is that the people who run the rail system insist on the park and ride. So they're not prepared to give up their park and ride lot at Mandurah for a transit-oriented development. So it's not until the Graham Road station gets built, one stop north, where all the park and ride can be transferred, there's land there, then the idea is to build out. And I've actually on my computer, I've got urban design plans, I've got sketches and link views of a big transit-oriented development around that station. But it's a question of when the government is prepared to build the Graham Road station to get rid of the park and ride. So it's not a lack of will.
Perhaps they would just rezone the area for commercial
Yeah, I don't know. In practice in Perth, the zonings don't necessarily mean that you get the dense development. There's a lot of areas around railway stations that are zoned 80 to 100 dwellings per hectare. But because they are maximum densities, developers can come along and build 20 dwellings per hectare. They can build duplexes if they want to. It'll still be approved. What we need in Perth is minimum densities, not maximum densities. And we need maximum parking, not minimum parking. So the planning system has got it completely around the wrong way. We dictate minimum parking standards when we should be saying, no, well, you can have up to a maximum of this. And we don't dictate minimum densities in strategic areas. So I'm not so sure that the zoning is important to facilitate it, but alone doesn't always work that way. In practice, the only good dense development that we've got in Perth with good urban design of the public realm, with good walkability, has been done through a redevelopment authority. The Joondalup was a redevelopment authority, Subiaco is a redevelopment authority, East Perth's a redevelopment authority, Midland and Armidale. That's 5 redevelopment authorities, and they're the only ones apart from Wellard and Provolone Central, that are coming together in a good way. And that's coordinated, strong planning.
Political there.
There is a political element there, but you kind of have to suspend the local town planning scheme and come in and say, look, this is what we want around this station. We will work with you to achieve the best outcome locally and taking account of local politics. But the bottom line is, this has got to densify. And then the redevelopment authority, when the parcels of land are put out to the private sector for development, there's a whole set of performance standards that are placed on that.
So for the rail lines, was there a redevelopment authority that took possession of all the land along the strip for rail? How did that manage?
No, it's done in an ad hoc way around particular stations.
So you just managed to link them up?
It's
compulsory purchase or something in some places?
The Subiaco one was done because there was an opportunity there linked to rail. The Midland Redevelopment Authority was done because Midland as a centre was declining. It was an old industrial site. It needed coordinated, strong planning and a good vision. So that was not just because there was a rail station or two rail stations. It was because there were other broader urban planning issues. But it just so happened to feed in to the public transport system. Yeah, Armidale Redevelopment Authority is the same thing. Armidale is a very run-down centre and needed a boost, and the only way to give it a coordinated, strong boost was to declare a redevelopment authority area and get some good planning happening.
I'm interested in why the rail network is attracting the level of support that it has, which is higher than your predictions. I mean, if we take central London, that has a very high market share of rail or commuter traffic, something in the order of 70%. But most of that is what economists would call a distressed purchase. People are travelling by rail because they don't have an alternative. There is no legal, affordable way of leaving a car in the centre of London. So if you're travelling central London at all, that's the only affordable option they have. I don't know about central Perth. If people are moving out of cars onto the railway, is it because commuting to central Perth by car is not a viable option, or is it the positive attraction the railway offers in terms of
Yeah, I think it's a synergy between those two things, because the people who commute from places like Mandurah or even intermediate places are commuting 50 to 75 kilometres, and then they're parking their car for a day, and that's costing them another $10, $15. They're spending a lot of money on fuel. It's a long distance, it's a return trip, and the public transport fares are competitive. They can sit there, they can read a book. It stacks up for them, I think.
I think the beauty is also, like I say, you can sit on the train, you can park at the parking lot, and you'll get right into the office. And it's fast because one thing goes wrong with on the freeway or the motorway, and you're totally stuck because you're like miles and miles of traffic.
The issue has got to be surely affordability. I mean, the price of public transport in London is huge, really, one of the most expensive in the world. I'd be very interested to know what the proportional cost is of one's income or of one's disposable income. I think, and this is why I think the gentleman's point about subsidy, and I don't have a problem with the word subsidy, because certain economists they think it's a dirty word. But the issue is, at the end of the day, the fares are being kept down in order to get the patronage you've got. And that's a policy decision that has to do with ideological premises, which is also fine. But that there seems to, in capitalist and Western Australia, it's very capitalist.
As long as they can get away with relatively high fares because demand is relatively inelastic because there isn't effectively an alternative option. These people in the short term, the long term, they'll live somewhere else, work somewhere else, or develop other travel patterns, but I don't know if the double the fares in Perth, whether that would have a perceptual impact on demand.
Well, the interesting thing, there's two ways to run a public transport system. One is with committed users and one is with non-committed single fare users. And unfortunately, Perth is still, it's probably improved a bit, but the fare offers available in Perth are not very creative. In Frankfurt, I buy a ticket. I pay €700 in cash at the beginning of the year, and I have a ticket for the whole year. And I use public transport everywhere, all the time. I get my pound of flesh out of that ticket. I'm a committed user. I've paid for it. In Perth, the most you can get is a 10-strip ticket. You know, it gives you 11 rides for the price of 10. It's a 10% discount, basically. I mean, now we have a smart rider system, a stored value ticket that you can use, but we haven't really got into really getting committed users by giving very, very big discounts on upfront purchases for a year. And Zurich and all the big European cities do this. They get a lot of committed users. And so in one sense you could argue that the Perth fares are actually not particularly competitive price-wise. To travel one way from Mandurah to Perth, that's 74 kilometres, is costing now, I think, a shade under $9. So to do a return fare as a single purchase, it's $18 a day to travel that distance. Now, unless you are very shrewd in the way you calculate your car costs, you know, you account for fuel and wear and tear and amortisation and insurance and so on. Unless you do that, and you manage to score a cheap commuter parking lot in the city, you probably would imagine that you might be able to do that trip, you know, not for $18 a day, but for maybe $12 a day. That's not the truth, because in fact you're paying a lot more than that to operate your car. But in that sense, I'm not so certain that it is just the cheapness or the economics of it that is driving people into it. I think there is a genuine tiredness in the population for all this long daily drives in traffic congestion that gets more and more congested as you approach the central city. Sitting there, getting to the car park, getting into the office, being exhausted. You sit on the train, sit there, you have a short walk to the office. I think there is a...
Jeff, I will assure you, when we start paying Southwestern train fares, you begin to realise the other side of the argument.
Yeah.
I mean, the financial penalties that British rail servers, not British rail, not English rail, but the British who are paying rail servers, is absolutely incredible. Phil, you would want to ask something some time ago, I believe.
Do you want to open the window a bit now? Because I can't see any faces down there. It's just blackness. Oh, actually, no, it's...
It was just to ask you to speculate, really. You mentioned very early on that the government were caught telling lies, essentially.
Well, not local government, state government.
Sorry, state government. Was that the fact that they were caught out? Was that the thing that swung it in favour of railways, i.e. railway? Well, it wasn't necessarily a time of vote for the railway, it was more a let's kick the government because they were caught out lying.
No, not really. I mean, we lost, in the short term we lost that. We got a lot of petitions. We developed a political commitment from the then opposition, but all the stuff that we exposed in the newspapers actually in the end didn't hurt the government at all. No, not really. It was a nuisance. It had a lot of nuisance value along the way, and it helped to publicise the whole issue of the rail line because it was kind of intriguing. It was a good read, and yeah, what the media likes. But in the end, it didn't make any tangible result in the election. They won the election quite comfortably. yeah, it was getting it into Labor Party policy, which they ultimately honoured.
I'm interested in the feasibility study that went against the bus decision, and the reason I'm interested in is because there's a CERT program along the Thames Gateway that connects Thurrock, South End, Basildon and Canberra and maybe somewhere else as well. And they're putting a CERT, and you know, you would probably say that would be silly when you've already got one railway line that does basically the same thing, you put another one that weaves in. What would your reaction to that be?
So we're talking about building a rail line? Or
yeah, I'm just wondering if they decide to do a CERT, which is essentially a bus rapid transit system. Would you put in a bus system, or would you do another rail system that was of a different kind, that went in different directions?
What's the problem with the existing one? Is it overloaded or ineffectual? Or?
Well, just run this commuter rail line into London, but then they've got another fast rapid transit bus system that connects to it. Because at South End Airport, Basildon, and some other places, and maybe if they go in a slightly different direction, so they pick up more commuters, that would probably find it a bit difficult to park because parking is probably not organised. I'm not quite sure why they chose CERT. Because, say for instance, I asked that question because I'm doing urban design for Harlow, and it's upgrading the railway station there.
Yeah.
And to my mind, there's already a commuter route that runs through from the airport, it's a Stansted down to London, which services right through the middle. And I'm faced with the feasibility ideas, and you know, that vie with each other. So there's a bus system, there's a tram train system, how do you connect up Harlow, and then when you talk about what happened in Perth, it makes me think, well then maybe you could have some linkage with some slightly other similar sized towns in a similar area. If you've got 75 k's and working into another system, Essex is just full of cars.
Yeah, well, I mean, my view is that the advantage of rail is that it is a permanent thing. It's a highly legible thing around which people build a much stronger mental map than they do a bus system. A bus system is seen as being a bit ephemeral, you know. It could be there, but it might not be there. And certainly developers like the certainty of rail because it's big, hard, expensive infrastructure, and they know that once it's there, you're not going to come along and rip it up. You might tamper with the services, but you're not going to remove it. And so that then tends to, I think, have a better city shaping effect. I mean, if you read the transport literature, you know that buses tend to follow the patronage to capture it, whereas rail tends to bring the patronage to itself, and so it has a channeling effect. And you can see that in Perth with the success of the Southern Line. I mean, it's very low density, but it's still capturing people. It's not meandering around. Part of Perth's problem, economic problem, is with the buses. They have to do so many revenue vehicle kilometres to pick up this very meagre patronage that the cost of operating the system is very, very high. Whereas more consolidated, higher quality lines operating more frequently, being fed better, actually stack up better economically.
So you're faced with a town, say like Harlow, and this train system runs through, and you've got other areas that you could connect to, which you put in a CERT, a tram, a bus, another train system.
Yeah, I mean,
you'll be faced with that at some time in the future, shouldn't it?
It depends. I mean, I favour the fixed track systems, but only in the right circumstances. They're not right for every circumstance. You know, in many circumstances, buses are much more appropriate. It just depends on what your objectives are. If you do have an objective not only to provide a good quality public transport connection, but you want to also help to reshape land use, then I would say it's better to invest up front in in the more expensive rail system. However, if you just are wanting to provide a fast public transport service that is relatively comfortable and has got some capacity for people into public transport, then maybe a bus rapid transit system is appropriate.
Jeff, call it closed after 7. And I want to thank you very much for this presentation. It's quite clear that there are elements here instead that we would view the train project, I think, as an light transit LRT project rather than the kind of heavy rail project, and that does bring in ideas that we were looking at Omega about elements of what I call, or what we call, retrofitting. I mean, putting the LRT in with the highways is actually a form of retrofitting, which I think has very valuable potential lessons for us here in the UK and elsewhere. But we could go on, and it's 7:30, and I'm aware that many people